Let's talk a little bit about this week's game. These teams in particular, Georgia's coming in as a big favorite. And do you think it's easier or harder to get your team ready when you're coming in from the position that Georgia is, where everybody has that target on your back?
Maybe slightly more tough, but most likely. I mean, I understood I was when I was there. I mean, that game, it doesn't matter who's got what record, and people talk about it all the time with rival games, but it's so true. You don't need a whole lot of extra motivation. I mean, I didn't have to sit there and dream up something to say to get them fired up about wanting to win the game. Same thing with Georgia Tech, and we have that hate rivalry there too. And those two games in particular, never really had to think of something special to say because the boys were, I think more than anything, you want to be careful not to get them too hyped because they, might be exhausted by the end of the first quarter. But the bottom line is guys don't need much motivation for that one.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
from not from the coach.
They're ready to play for sure. Georgia is coming off a super impressive win against Texas in Austin, and they are the betting favorites in the SEC right now. Thoughts on where they are as a team right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously their defense was just smothered Texas, and Texas obviously is a really, really good football team. And to see them do that, pretty much the whole game was very impressive. And Georgia's offense is probably a little bit underrated, quite frankly. They, have kind of played second fiddle to the defense at this point, but they've got their players that can make plays and a quarterback that's very experienced. And so I think they're in pretty good shape. So Florida's got some things. I really truthfully haven't watched much of it or any of Florida this year because I work with the ACC network, and during game day, we might have 6 screens, but we're looking at 5 ACC games. But then I do talk them into letting me have 1 screen of the Georgia game. So I've seen a good bit of Georgia, but not much of Florida.
You mentioned Georgia's offense, and Carson Beck has had some really, really great moments this season. And he's also had some moments like the first half of the Bama game. What do
Right.
you expect out of him on Saturday? He does have experience playing in this rivalry.
Yeah, he does. I think he'll do well. I mean, he's a veteran player, and a lot of guys have an off day and all that kind of thing. I mean, NFL guys do too. So I don't think he's shook up by any means. I think he's ready to just, take care of business.
I know you said you haven't watched Florida much or at all this season, but they're led by a true freshman, DJ Lagway. How overwhelming is this game for any true freshman, particularly true freshman quarterback, to be starting in?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's no doubt about it because it does mean so much. And then, if the team's riding high, it's one thing. If the team is up and down or struggling, it's hard to overcome it. And a lot of reasons why a team struggles with a freshman quarterback is because he's a freshman quarterback. I mean, some of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of college and pro football as freshmen or as rookies in the NFL have struggled mightily. I mean, Matthew Stafford was the first pick of the draft when he left Georgia, but his true freshman year when he got to play, he was struggling, and it took him a while to get the hang of things. So, usually a guy with the right skill set and the right motivation and the right patience, which sometimes that's the hardest thing to buy. Those guys will develop into really good players, but sometimes guys get put in the frying pan too soon. They don't perform as good as everybody wants. Everybody decides the kid can't play, he loses confidence, and that's tough on those kids.
Yeah, he's definitely going through trial by fire right now. There's obviously a lot that Kirby Smart does better than most coaches in college football. Halftime adjustments is one of them. The second half turnaround against Bama was one of the most impressive halves of
Right.
football I think most people have ever seen. If you are an opposing coach, how do you combat that?
Well, one thing you do is just hold some of your game plan to the second half. If you shoot all your bullets, so to speak, in the first half, and they know what to adjust to, then they got a pretty good chance of making adjustments if they're good at that. But if you hold on to some things offensively or maybe hang on to something defensively as far as a front or a certain pressure you might want to bring. And if you could just hang on, I mean, the hardest thing as a coach and a play caller is to hold on to something you think is really good. But if you can wait till halftime to spring it on them, then they have less time to adjust. All of a sudden, they're trying to adjust in between series or a commercial break or between third and fourth quarter. But if you shoot all your bullets in the first half, they got 30 minutes to really coach it up.
Trevor Etienne transferred to Georgia from Florida. This was a guy that was, Florida's running back
Right.
one last
Sure.
year. And I know that that's something that's sort of commonplace in today's college football, but could you imagine somebody leaving Georgia for UF during your day and you're looking across the field, you're seeing somebody in orange and blue who you saw in red and black just the season before?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird. As we know, it's a whole new world. I mean, we're living in a time where it's unrestricted free agency with no salary cap. I mean, it's crazy. At least the NFL has a collective bargaining agreement. Everybody decides what the cap is. Everybody decides how you can and can't move as a free agent. It's not unrestricted, like it is in college. It's not unrestricted as far as the amount of money guys can make. I mean, somewhere along the line, everybody's going to have to get their heads together. The leagues, the states, the different universities have all got to get on the same page, which is like herding cats. When we have all those different groups, it's going to be very difficult to put the reins on this thing. But there's got to be some kind of limit other than just what one particular team decides has been enough. Because there's going to be more, the richer teams are just going to become richer.
Yeah. Do you think that the transfer portal and NIL and all of this has led to players devaluing rivalry games?
To a certain degree, yes. I mean, it's much more about me. It's much more about my, you know, persona and my, ability to make money on the web. And I mean, the players have so much leverage now from an individual standpoint than they've ever had. It's just hard to think that team means as much as it used to. It just doesn't. And that's probably one of the hardest things I would think for coaches is to continue to create that kind of team atmosphere when guys are always, coming to their office and saying, "Look, if I don't get a better NIL deal, I'm leaving." I just can't imagine having to deal with that on a daily and yearly basis.
I asked Urban this, but I want to ask you too. How do you prepare for this game in particular when things are different, right? We talked about from a rivalry perspective, but from, there's always a bye week before. It's in an NFL stadium. The atmosphere, like you had alluded to, is different than it is any other week of the year because it's split exactly 50-50. During your week of practice, were there things that you did differently that week than any other game?
Well, the most practical thing that you have to deal with is, as you mentioned, it's an NFL field, and usually they may have changed it now, but just even how the field markings are, the hashes for the pros are more close, they're more close to the middle than the
Mhm.
college hashes, and usually they wouldn't take the NFL hashes off there. They would just add the college one. So you'd have to kind of train your guys, hey, this is our hash, and not the NFL hashes. So because the hashes do mean something to you when you're trying to get your spacing and your formations.
All right. Well, Coach, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And do you have any like way too early score predictions for this one?
Oh, I'd have to just guess and say about 31 17, the Georgia Bulldogs.
All right. All right. Well, we're going to write it down. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. This was awesome.
All right. Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.